There's a lot of money on the line here. Winning first place gets you 25,000 pounds. It's almost $32,000. But there are also bonuses for breaking the IPF world record.
It's like, yeah, Quant can hold his own with any of these guys, and it's really good to see him in contention. And I'm excited to see the semifinals and the games in 2024.
The guy still has an impact, and his career is still one that we talk about and are working to contextualize. Hey folks, welcome to Strength Weekly, the show that brings you all the news that you need from around the barbell game, and honestly some news you didn't know you need, but you definitely want. I'm one of your hosts, David Thomas Tao, joined by the intrepid, the incomparable, the very smart and also incredibly kind Phil Blackman. Phil, how are we feeling this week about these hot stories and hotter takes we have on Strength Weekly?
It was a lot of massive downpour in Miami for the first CrossFit competition of the year, and it was hot. It was hot, so we're going to get into it.
Let's get into it. Your Strength Weekly run of show. Our top story today is actually from 2015. Before he served a lengthy doping suspension, weightlifter Ilya Ilyin almost clean and jerk 247 kilograms. We also have results from Wodapalooza, Miami, the first major competition in not only the CrossFit calendar this year, but the strength sports calendar. And then, do you think you're really strong? Well, Larry Wheels is one of the strongest people in the world and might not have been strong enough for Pilates. Finally, Jesus Olivares squats a ridiculous amount of weight for 5. It might be the heaviest set of 5 in the raw back squat we've ever seen, at least that I've ever seen. Bill, which of these stories are you most excited about?
2024 Wodapalooza Miami for a bunch of different reasons. Not only is it the first of 2 Wodapaloozas this year, which we'll get into, but like some of the performances were really impressive and are indicative of what's to come for the rest of the CrossFit season.
All right, well, let's get into our first story, which is all about the clicks, what you really want to see. It's a clip that's only a few seconds long, but it took the internet by storm. It is Ilya Ilyin of Kazakhstan in 2015, preparing for the President's Cup in Grozny, Russia, clean and jerked in training, or attempted to clean and jerk 247 kilograms. Now, he weighed 105 kilograms or around that at the time. This was not like an official competition. This was in training. At that competition, he set a new massive world record in that weight category with a 246 kilogram clean and jerk. It is a legendary lift. It was the top weight lifted in his storied weightlifting career. Now, I want to point out, Ilya Ilyin did serve a lengthy doping suspension sometime after this, did not compete at the 2016 Rio Olympics because retests of his samples from the 2008 and 2012 Olympics came back positive and he was stripped of his gold medals. Let's contextualize this. So for a period of nearly a decade, starting when he was 17 years old, Ilya Ilyin was undefeated in international competition at the senior level. He won his first senior world championship when he was just 17, won the Olympics in 2008 and 2012 as a 94 kilo lifter, had that on lock. After the 2012 Olympics in London, actually moved up a weight class to the 105 kilogram division. This was before weight class restructuring, and dominated that at the international level, was undefeated. And then at the President's Cup in Grozny in 2015, pulled out this 246 kilogram clean and jerk to really redefine what folks thought was possible in that weight category. And then the train comes off the tracks after that, after doping retests. And he was present at the Rio Olympics as a spectator, but did not compete because he was serving a doping suspension. This makes Ilyin's career one of the most complex in weightlifting history because for a time he was considered like the ultimate weightlifting prodigy. He was someone who many folks had in the conversation while he was still active, while he was still in his mid-20s, as potentially the greatest weightlifter of all time. And after he served his doping suspension, he did get back into weightlifting, was not able to achieve nearly the success, and really wasn't even competing for medals at the international level, and then retired after the Tokyo Olympics were postponed due to COVID. Phil, curious, as someone who kind of came to strength sports coverage after the peak of Ilyin's career, what is your impression of this lifter, and what do you remember first learning about him, in 2018, 2019?
Yeah, when I first came on board at Barbend, covering those doping scandals that came out from those retests were really one of the first extensive beats that I covered. And it felt like I was writing a doping story 6 times a week with how much coverage there was of each doping scandal. What I found was that even though he was serving his doping suspension, he was still very much active on his YouTube, on his training platforms to display how to properly lift and all this stuff. And you can tell how quality form that he had, and that only exacerbated how complex the issue became, because you're like, man, not only does this guy get it, and not only does his, joints have more flexibility than any other person I've ever seen in the entire European region, but like, okay, he's the top in the world, but he also now is forever going to be tainted by the fact that he had these doping retests that claimed his golds. So he becomes, in my mind, one of those figures of we'll never actually know because you can't rewrite history. But is he the GOAT? Would you place him as the GOAT? I love that discussion.
He was exciting. He was exciting. He would get pumped up. He was this young lifter on the scene who really played to the crowd. He was dancing on stage. In training, you'd see him dancing to techno between, attempts at world record weights. It was really something. And this was before social media was as prevalent. So we weren't seeing training videos every week from these athletes. Now, the top lifters are posting training videos. They want to up their social followings. They have sponsors who want to leverage that reach. Ilyin, he was a celebrity, still is a celebrity in his native Kazakhstan, but it wasn't like he was dropping training videos every day like we see with a lot of international elite lifters today. The training footage would come out in bits and spurts, but it wasn't, you weren't really seeing his training updates in real time. You never knew exactly what kind of strength he was bringing to the stage until you saw him in competition. No one at around 105 kilos body weight in competition is attempting anywhere near 246, 247 kilos today. I just want to point out, this is significantly above the weights we're seeing thrown around in competition today. Doping controls have gotten more stringent. Anti-doping technology has gotten more advanced. So take that as you will. Just worth noting, this video took the internet by storm over 8 years after it was recorded.
Yeah.
I mean, this came out early 2024. So the guy still has an impact, and his career is still one that we talk about and are working to contextualize in weightlifting history today. Let's move on. Wodapalooza, an event that recently happened, not something that happened over 8 years ago. Wodapalooza Miami, there are now 2 Wodapaloozas in the calendar, which is going to take me a while to get into my thick skull. Wodapalooza Miami 2024. Phil, tail of the tape. Who won?
So at Bayfront Park in Miami, on the elite side, we have Emma Carey for the women coming up with a huge win with 458 points. Second was Gabriela Magala with 452 points. And Danielle Brandon getting on the podium at 435.5 points. She came up big in the handstand walk and all the gymnastic events like she normally does. And that helped her push her over the top with a big 100-point event to get onto the podium. On the men's side, Ricky Garrard, man's back in it. Bronze at the games, wins here at Wodapalooza. He beat Brent Fikowski, who got in the silver medal spot, and Sam Quant back on the podium with 413 points. Welcome back, Sam.
Is this his biggest podium finish since his second place finish at the 2020 games, the pandemic games?
This is his podium finish since then, yes. Like this is the sign that Quant's a player this season. Oh yeah.
Quant's back. Quant's back, baby.
Oh yeah, he's back.
Oh my God. And this is Garrard's second victory in a row, correct?
This is Garrard's second victory. He has been consistently performing well. He did get injured recently, and so he was coming back off of that injury. So this was really the test to see how well he had recovered from that. And clearly he recovered well, and he's performing to literally the top end. Wodapalooza is known for its team events, which are team trios events. It's 3 members per team. And that is really the headliner of Wodapalooza. It's really what sets it apart from something like the games or any of the rest of the CrossFit season. So a lot of the prestige is looked at over on the team side. And because of that, a lot of the big individual athletes will also compete on teams rather than in individual competition. Technically, they're still in their off season. The CrossFit Open doesn't start until late February. So as athletes are building their engines and getting back up to that, they won't necessarily compete in individual at Wodapalooza. They'll compete on a team because the workload is a little bit more spread and it's a bit easier of a lift, so to speak, than competing on the individual side. However, Garrard was like, you know what I'm going to do? You know what I'm going to do, David? I'm Ricky Garrard. I'm one of the best in the world. He's like, I'm going to win on the individual side, and then I'm also going to compete on the team side.
Wait. Okay. So how did the scheduling work for those who weren't watching the entire thing? How did that work out scheduling wise? Did he have to bounce back and forth between events?
No. So the schedule from the 11th through the 14th, the first 2 days of competition, it was individuals. And then the second 2 days of competition, it was teams. Now, there were some adjustments made to the competition due to rain. It was rainy all weekend in Miami. Up and down the eastern seaboard was bad weather. In my remote area of New York, a lot of snow. Down in Miami, a lot of rain. So they had to adjust a bunch of the workouts for that. So the individuals did 5 workouts, which is not a lot in terms of being able to move up and down the leaderboard, like every event really, 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 really counts. And then on the team side, they did 6 events. So first 2 days, individuals, second 2 days, teams.
Well, what's the tail of the tape on the team side?
The tail of the tape on the team side, so we'll get Ricky Garrard out of the way here. He competed on team tier, and they got 4th place. So just off the podium on the men's side. So Ricky Garrard had a pretty impressive weekend. On the women's side, it was stronger than a 90s trend, captained by Kelsey Keel. They got 540 points to win for the women's teams, friend of the pod, over on Barbend. And then on the team on the men's side, it was Team Go Wad, which is pretty significant because guess who was the captain of that team?
Who was the captain of that team, Phil?
2-time fittest man on earth, Justin Medeiros, coming back in. He leads Team Gowad to the victory over Roman Karenikov, who was the silver medalist at the games for the last couple of years on Team Pixel. And then Hombre Hombres, which we'll get into, I think is the most indicative for what we can expect for team competition at the games, because 2 of their athletes are already slated to compete together for that time. And this was really their first showing together to see how well they can perform. And they performed really well.
I want to dig in on a few things here, and I love that you contextualize this, Phil, because the teams have become the focus at Wodapalooza Miami. It hasn't always been the case, but they are really the focus now. So it is indicative of how some individuals are doing on the individual side. Although with 5 events, it was a very short competition, truncated this year. The team side, it's tough to tell like how fit is Justin Medeiros right now competing on a team. Tough to like pull out or isolate those individual performances. But I do want to dig into a few names here. Danielle Brandon, making the podium as an individual. Danielle Brandon is someone we've seen sniff the podium in top competition before, and she is always in the running and always in the conversation as one of the best CrossFitters on the planet. But to see her actually make the podium, there have been a few games where she's kind of gotten tripped up, right? She's fallen out of podium contention in the final days of competition. To see her secure a bronze medal here, really lean into her strengths on the gymnastics elements, really impressive stuff. How did she look for you on the weekend?
Danielle Brandon was very impressive for me all weekend. I think she's one of those athletes where I look at her in a similar vein that I look at some like strongman athletes with their signature events. So like anytime you know that Tom Stoltman is going to step onto the field of play with the Atlas Stones, he's winning that event. And it's very similar with Danielle Brandon with anything that involves gymnastics. If there's a handstand walk, Danielle Brandon's doing it 4 times faster than anybody else, and it's not going to be close. And all of the other athletes need to calibrate that they aren't going to be able to get top points in one of those events unless Danielle Brandon has some kind of huge mistake that like botches that event. So there isn't really anybody else with any other kind of event that jumps out to me as like clearly the favorite every time it happens. And there's always gymnastic events. There's always a handstand walk featured at these major events in some capacity. So the fact that Danielle Brandon going into any big CrossFit event, in my mind, already has a 100-point event secured is a telltale sign that it's like, okay, all she has to do is fix some of those weaknesses because she's already so far ahead in the other aspects of the game.
Okay, and Samuel Quant. Let's dial in on Samuel Quant because we have not seen him on the podium in almost 4 years. Good to see him back.
It's great to see Sam back. The 2020 CrossFit Games were unique ones in that there was a cut to the top 5 so they could compete on the ranch because we were amidst lockdowns due to COVID-19. And so he makes the cut into the top 5 and then he gets second place, but then he doesn't have any big finishes immediately thereafter. The story really became Justin Medeiros, who then went from 3rd place at that in the 2020 games, wins back-to-back games the following 2 years. It's not like he was, totally out of contention. He had top 15 finishes at the games. He's still an elite athlete on the planet, but it didn't have the same resonance because he was right next to Justin Medeiros on that podium, who then had back-to-back wins. So, was that just a random one-off year that he made the top 5 cut and then that, sort of pushed him up the rankings that he otherwise wouldn't have gotten? And I love that he podiumed here because he sort of put that kind of speculation to rest. It's like, yeah, Quant can hold his own with any of these guys, and it's really good to see him in contention. And I'm excited to see him be the big man again on the floor come the semifinals in the games in 2024.
Samuel Quant, definitely a friend of the brand as well. Been on the Barbend podcast, someone I love watching. Let's move on because talking about the big man, Larry Wheels, who has competed in about everything except for CrossFit. And weightlifting. He's competed in powerlifting, strongman, arm wrestling, I think. He got a little humbled recently. And I bring this up, and we added this to the roster today for the top stories, not necessarily because it's breaking news, but because it's something that we have been talking about for weeks on Strength Weekly. Phil, if people think they're strong, what is a one-way ticket to Humbletown?
Oh, you want to go to Humbletown? You think you're strong? Yeah, go take a Pilates class. Go step on a revolver and then step off of it, unable to walk, and tell me you're strong. You ain't strong.
A reformer, I think you mean. A revolver would be Pilates revolver?
You can tell how, no, it's a reformer. You're right. You can tell how I feel about when I take a Pilates class. Buddy, dude, like the last time I took a Pilates class, I couldn't move. I squat heavy, David. I squat. You ain't strong if you ain't take Pilates.
You ain't strong. I'm going to be rude and read off the script because there were some great quotes. Look, we'll have some clips from the video. You should definitely read more about it on Barbend. You can find the embedded video there. Like, Larry will link to the video. Larry did a great job being vulnerable. One thing I like about Larry Wheels is one of the strongest people on the planet, all-time world record holder in powerlifting. He's not afraid to be vulnerable. He's not afraid to go outside his comfort zone and say, hey, there are disciplines where I don't excel, and there are ways that I am challenged as an athlete. And I love the vulnerability there. And I love that he's willing to say, like, cool, I'm going to go outside of my domain of expertise and experience, and I'm going to push myself, and I'm going to bring that to you. I love some of these quotes. This feels like a hospital bed in reference to being on the reformer. I expected Pilates to be challenging, but I didn't know how much. This is very eye-opening. Again, showing that vulnerability, that openness to trying new things and exploring new domains. They were doing the short box ab exercise. Everything is the opposite of what I've been told to do as a power lifter.
The thing that jumped out to me about this is that since Larry, his target for 2024 is to get his IFBB Pro card, what I like about him trying Pilates, strongman, and powerlifting, you're training the movement. You're not training the muscles. And in bodybuilding, you have to train the muscles, not necessarily the movement. So a lot of the time when you're training for hypertrophy and training for bodybuilding, you're not going to be training for efficiency of movement because you want to work the muscles through their lengthened and shortened positions to really maximize the stimulus so that they can grow. And what Pilates will do to people who are not fully accustomed to it is they will train your muscles in positions you didn't know they could go in. And that's how you know you ain't strong.
That's how you know you ain't Pilates. You ain't Pilates strong. You ain't a rounded athlete. You got weaknesses. Buddy.
You know what's harder than getting your IFBB Pro card? Pilates, David.
I'm not touching that one. We're moving on. We're gonna get off of our reinforced soapbox because we are both thick boys. And we're going to talk about Jesus Olivares preparing for the 2024 Sheffield. Phil, just quick context. What is the Sheffield?
So the Sheffield event is arguably one of the biggest powerlifting events of the year now, in my mind, given the quality of athlete that it invites. An invitational tournament that invites some of the top athletes from major competitions over the course of the previous year. So Olivares won this last year. And it's not a full-on powerlifting competition where you compete against others in your division. What you do is you're competing to try and put on the closest total to the world record in your weight class. And then you are scored based on that across the table. So it does allow the competition to compare people across weight classes because they're competing against their own weight class's world record. And you know who has the world record in the super heavyweight category?
Who would that be, Phil?
I believe it's Olivares in pretty much everything.
Well, he is certainly showing that his squat is in form heading into the Sheffield because he hit 400 kilograms. That's 882 pounds. Not for a single, not for a double, but for five. 882 pounds for 5. And it looked good. And it was raw, right? This is raw with sleeves, not wraps. This is raw IPF. This is classic IPF, right? Like you got to walk the weight out. You can't wear wraps. No monoliths, right? No wraps. You just get sleeves, a belt, and he also wore wrist wraps because why wouldn't you? Because you have to hold nearly 900 pounds on your back for a set of 5. He made it look good. This is a man who does not get called on depth a lot at powerlifting meets because he's sinking these. I love that the Sheffield is kind of a level playing field, right? You get to see super heavies compete against the lighter weight classes, et cetera, because they're competing against the world record marks. There's a lot of money on the line here. Winning first place gets you 25,000 pounds. That's almost $32,000. But there are also bonuses for breaking the IPF world record at the Sheffield. If Olivares were to win and set world records, he could make almost 60,000 US dollars for like one meet.
It is also not out of the realm of possibility that Olivares could actually do what you just said and rake in that kind of coin for one event. His training over the last several weeks leading up to the Sheffield on February 10th has been spectacular. He will go for world records. He owns 2 of them. He might call for a world record squat on the bar, which is the one that he doesn't have. The way that tournament is set up, you are incentivized. Any athlete at the Sheffield is incentivized to always be going for as much as they possibly can, because all of the incentives are just for the biggest possible lifts that you can make across each of the 3 big lifts, and then also for the total. So there isn't like, oh, this person hit this, I'm just going to go like 1 kilo over, even though I maybe could go heavier because I just want to try and secure the win. No. Even if you have the win, you're still incentivized to go for a world record because there's more money on the line. It is very well set up for us spectators to see the biggest possible lifts from the best athletes in the game.
And I think so far, look, I don't know all the economics behind it. I'm not the event organizer and I don't want to speculate too much. But from a spectator standpoint, as someone who follows this stuff closely and is passionate about this, I think this format has been a resounding success thus far.
Yeah, 100% agree. I only expect the Sheffield to get more and more popular over the next handful of years. It gets the best athletes and it has the biggest prize purse. Like, what more can you expect or would want from that kind of meet?
I don't want anything more, and I'm not asking for anything more. So the Sheffield will be tuning in on U.S. time, but it happens in the jolly old UK. Phil, that has been Strength Weekly for this blustery, cold, well, not cold Miami, but cold for a lot of the country. Cold week in January. We're off to the races as the Strength Sports calendar heats up to keep us warm, heading further into 2024. Until next week, I'm David Thomas Tao.
I'm Phil Bleckman. Thank you, everybody, for joining. We're going to get a lot more exciting Strength Weeklies coming up as the seasons for all of the big strength sports really heat up in February. So stick around. You're not going to want to miss anything that's happening in 2024.
More of this. I got to do some more curls. I got to get a pump before these.
You should do Pilates.